the mare's one good eye locked onto his across the jeering crowd. $20. His last $20. For an animal they called cursed. By morning, she'd show him why 5 men had given her away. Before we dive into the story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more incredible stories tomorrow. Also, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, let's continue with the story. Silas Garrick stood at the back of the crowd, dirt under his fingernails and hunger in his belly. The Blackthorn trading post reeked of sweat and tobacco smoke. Men shouted bids for strong horses, good breeding stock, animals that could pull a plow or carry a rider through rough country. Then the auctioneer dragged out the mare. Laughter erupted immediately. She was a wreck of an animal, sway-backed, ribs showing through patchy coat, scars crisscrossing her flanks like a map of violence. Her left eye was clouded white, blind. She limped on her front left leg. "Buzzard bait," someone shouted. "Glue factory special," another man called out. The auctioneer grinned, gap-toothed and cruel. "Come on now, gents. She's still got 4 legs. Mostly. Who'll start at $5? Silence. Men turned away, losing interest. Silas watched the mare. Despite her condition, she held her head up. Her one good eye swept across the crowd with something that looked like judgment. When that eye found him, it stopped. Held. Something passed between them in that moment. Something Silas couldn't name. Recognition, maybe. Or desperation. Recognizing itself. His father had looked at him the same way the mare was being looked at now. Worthless. Broken. Not worth the food it took to keep him breathing. His father had been wrong. Maybe they were wrong about her too. $20, Silas heard himself say. The crowd turned. Men stared like he'd lost his mind. "You serious, Garrick?" The auctioneer squinted at him. $20, Silas repeated, voice steady despite his racing heart. That money was meant for seed, for supplies, for survival through the coming winter. Sold to the fool with more pity than sense. Men laughed as Silas walked forward. He took the rope lead, felt the rough fiber against his calloused palm. Up close, the mare smelled of neglect and old fear. But when he touched her neck, she didn't flinch. She leaned into his hand, just slightly. "You're the 6th owner in 3 months, the trader muttered, handing over the papers. "Others all said she's cursed. Wouldn't work. Wouldn't eat. Stood around like she was waiting for something, or someone." He spat tobacco juice. "Good riddance." Silas led her outside into the Montana afternoon. The sun hung low over Copper Ridge, painting everything gold and red. The mare walked beside him with strange purpose, head up despite her limp, that one good eye fixed forward like she knew exactly where she was going. He didn't know it yet, but she did. She'd been waiting 6 months for someone like him. Someone desperate enough, kind enough, or foolish enough to follow where she needed to lead. By morning, everything would change. Silas named her Delilah, not because she was beautiful, but because she had secrets. He could see it in the way she moved, the way she watched. His ranch sat 3 miles outside Copper Ridge, a collection of weathered buildings fighting against the wind. The barn door hung crooked on its hinges. The fence needed mending. Everything needed mending, including him. He led Delilah to the barn, gave her water and the last of his good hay. She drank deeply, but barely touched the feed. When he turned to leave, she followed him out. "No, girl, you stay here." He guided her back inside. She waited until he was halfway to the cabin, then walked out again, straight to his window, She stood there, perfectly still, staring at him through the warped glass. Silas tried 4 more times. Each time, she returned to the window. "Fine. Stand there if you want." He lay in bed, exhausted, listening to the wind. Sleep came fast. Then something woke him. A sound. He grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. Delilah was gone. He found her at the northern edge of his property, standing perfectly still in the moonlight. When she saw him, she walked 20 paces further north, stopped, then returned. She repeated this exact pattern. North 20 paces. Stop. Return. North 20 paces. Stop. Return. "What are you doing?" She ignored him, walking the pattern again. Her movements were too precise to be random, too purposeful to be meaningless. By dawn, she'd walked that same route 11 times. Silas rode into Copper Ridge that morning, left Delilah tied outside the general store. Inside, old Werner was stacking cans. "That the cursed mare?" Werner peered through the window. "She's just a horse." "That's what Threadgill used to say." Werner shook his head. "Amos Threadgill. Prospector. She was his. Found him dead 6 months back, up at his cabin. She was standing right over the body. Some folks think she killed him." Silas felt cold spread through his chest. "Where's his cabin?" "North edge of your property line. Collapsed now. Nobody goes there." Werner leaned closer. 5 men bought that mare after Threadgill died. Every single one brought her back within a week. Said she wouldn't eat, wouldn't work. Just stood around waiting, like she was looking for something. Or someone, Silas thought. "How'd Threadgill die?" "Nobody knows. No marks on him. Doc said maybe his heart gave out. He was 53, lived hard." Werner lowered his voice. "But there's talk. Virgil Cade was asking about him right before he died. Cade's a claim jumper, mean as a snake. Threadgill was working a claim, then suddenly stopped. Some say he found something big and hid it before Cade could take it. Silas bought coffee he couldn't afford and left. Outside, Delilah was staring north again. That same fixed, purposeful stare. "You trying to tell me something, girl?" Her ear flicked toward him, but she didn't look away from whatever called to her in the distance. Threadgill's cabin. The place she'd watched her owner die. The place she kept trying to reach. Silas looked north, toward the boundary of his land, toward answers buried in a dead man's ruins. Tomorrow, he'd follow her. Wherever she wanted to go. Whatever she needed to show him. He had a feeling his $20 was about to become either the best or worst investment of his life. Dawn came cold and gray. Silas saddled his gelding, but kept Delilah on a lead rope. "Show me," he said simply. She moved immediately, pulling north with surprising strength. No hesitation, no wandering. She knew exactly where she was going. Threadgill's cabin appeared through the pine trees after 20 minutes. The roof had caved in on one side. The door hung open like a broken jaw. Delilah stopped 50 feet away, her whole body tense. Silas dismounted. "It's all right, girl." She took 3 steps forward, then circled the cabin. Once. Twice. On the 3rd pass, she stopped at the eastern corner and began pawing the ground. Not random scratching. Deliberate, focused digging at one specific spot beneath the collapsed floorboards. Silas pulled away the rotted wood. The smell of damp earth hit him. He dug with his hands, feeling through dirt and rock. His fingers touched something that wasn't soil. Leather. wrapped in oilcloth. He pulled it free. A journal, protected from moisture and time. The cover was worn smooth, the pages yellowed but readable. Inside the front cover, written in careful script, property of Amos Threadgill. If found, trust the Mare. Silas flipped through pages of notes, sketches, calculations. Then he found the entries that mattered. June 3rd, 1881. Cade knows I found something. Saw his man watching from the ridge today. Need to move everything before he makes his play. June 15th, 1881. It's done. Change the location. Only Delilah knows the pattern now. Took 2 years to train her right, but she won't fail. If Cade finds me, she'll lead the right man to what's owed. June 16th, 1881. Final insurance in place. The church bell position, where the saint's shadow falls at harvest. She knows every step. If you're reading this, follow her at dawn and dusk. Watch what she does. The answer is in her movements. The next page was blank except for 4 words. They're coming for me. No more entries after that. Threadgill died the next day. Silas looked up at Delilah. She stood perfectly still, watching him with that one good eye. Waiting. He taught you something, didn't he? Where he hid it. Her ear flicked. Not random. Purposeful. Silas heard it then. Horses. Multiple riders coming fast from the south. He shoved the journal inside his coat and mounted quickly. Come on, girl. We need to move. They made it back to his property just as 4 riders appeared on the ridge behind them. Even from a distance, Silas recognized the lead man's posture. Virgil Cade. The riders stopped, watching, making sure Silas knew they were there, making sure he understood what was coming. Silas locked the journal in his trunk that night, but he couldn't lock away the knowledge burning in his mind. Threadgill had hidden something valuable, valuable enough to die protecting, and Cade knew it. Delilah stood guard at his cabin door, refusing to eat or rest. At midnight, she began her pattern again, facing east. 12 paces. Stop. Turn. She repeated it 6 times before dawn. Silas watched, counting, memorizing. The church bell position. The saint's shadow. Harvest time. He opened the journal again, searching for the meaning hidden in a dead man's code and a mare's trained movements. Whatever Threadgill had buried, time was running out to find it. 3 days. Silas spent 3 days watching Delilah like she was a puzzle he needed to solve before someone else did. Sunrise. Every morning she faced east toward the horizon. Not just looking, staring with absolute focus at something only she could see. Silas checked his father's old maps. 15 miles due east sat the ruins of Mission Santa Margarita, abandoned since the Mexican War. Spanish priests built it in 1779. The locals called it the Bell Tower now, though the bell had been silent for 30 years. The church bell position. At noon, Delilah would move to the center of the corral and paw the ground. Not frantic, methodical. Silas counted. Always 12 times. Exactly 12. Then she'd stop and wait, like she expected something to happen. At dusk, she walked a pattern that made no sense until Silas drew it in the dirt. 5 points. A star. She traced it perfectly, returning to her starting position each time. Threadgill's journal mentioned harvest. Silas found the passage again, where the saint's shadow falls at harvest. He rode into town, found Father Domingo at the small church. The old mission, Silas asked. There's a statue there? San Miguel, Saint Michael. Stone, maybe 8 feet tall. Still stands in the courtyard. The priest studied him. Why? Just curious about the area. Don't be too curious. Men have died chasing ghosts out there. Father Domingo's voice dropped. Virgil Cade's been digging around that mission for months, tearing up the courtyard looking for something. Silas felt ice in his veins. Did he find anything? No, but he's still looking. The priest gripped his arm. Whatever you're thinking, let it go. Cade doesn't share. That night, Silas spread his maps across the table. The autumn equinox was in 5 days. September 22nd, harvest time. He calculated sun angles, shadow positions, the exact moment when San Miguel's shadow would point somewhere specific. 4:47 p.m. That's when the shadow would be longest, most precise. But a shadow alone wasn't enough. The courtyard was massive. You could dig for months and find nothing. Unless you had Delilah. Unless you knew her 12 paces and star pattern meant something at most. That exact location at that exact time. Threadgill was brilliant. He'd created a treasure map that required astronomy, geometry, and a trained animal to read. Without all 3 elements together, the hiding place stayed hidden forever. A sound outside. Silas grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. A man stood at his fence line. Not Cade, one of his crew. Just standing there in the moonlight, watching the cabin, making sure Silas knew they were always watching. Delilah pressed against the cabin door, a low sound building in her throat. Not quite a whinny, almost a warning. Silas checked his ammunition. 5 days until the equinox. 5 days until he could decode Threadgill's final secret. 5 days for Cade to figure out what he knew and take everything by force. The mare pawed the ground 12 times. Even now, even scared, she kept the pattern. "I know, girl," Silas whispered. "I know what we have to do." They'd have to reach the mission before Cade understood what the date meant. They'd have to survive long enough to see where the shadow fell, and then Silas would have to decide if a dead man's treasure was worth dying for. They came at noon when the sun was highest and shadows were shortest. 4 riders. Virgil Cade in front, 3 guns behind him. They didn't bother with the gate, just rode straight onto Silas's property like they owned it. Silas met them in the yard, rifle in hand. Delilah stood behind him, tense and ready. Cade was a lean man with dead eyes and a smile that never reached them. "That's Threadgill's mare. She's mine. Bought her legal. I'll give you $50 for her." Cade's hand rested on his pistol. Casual. Threatening. "Not for sale. $100 then." "No." Cade's smile disappeared. "That animal knows something. Threadgill was working a claim worth thousands, registered it proper with the territory office, but never filed the location. Then he died. Convenient." He leaned forward in his saddle. "I've been tracking that mare for 6 months. She's the key to finding what Threadgill hid. She's just a horse. Then you won't mind selling her." Silas raised the rifle slightly, not pointing it, just adjusting his grip. "I mind." The 3 men behind Cade shifted in their saddles. Hands moved closer to weapons. The air went tight with the possibility of violence. Cade studied Silas for a long moment. "You're Garrick, the one whose daddy drank himself to death and left you nothing but debts. You're barely holding on out here." His voice went soft, almost friendly. "Why die for a broken horse you bought out of pity? Maybe I got uses for her you don't know about." Something flickered in Cade's eyes. Understanding. "You found something. At Threadgill's cabin." It wasn't a question. Silas said nothing, which was answer enough. Cade straightened in his saddle. "The equinox is in 4 days. That mean anything to you, Garrick?" The words hit like a fist. Cade knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to be dangerous. "I'll give you until September 22nd to think about my offer," Cade said. "After that, I stop asking nice." He turned his horse. "Come on, boys." They rode out slow, making sure Silas watched them leave, making sure he understood they could come back any time. Delilah moved to Silas's side, pressing against his leg. She was shaking. That night, she wouldn't go into the barn. She stood guard at the cabin door, refusing to eat or rest. Every hour, she'd walk to the northern fence line and stare toward the mission, then return. Silas cleaned his rifle and counted his ammunition. 12 rounds. Not enough if Cade brought more men. Not nearly enough. He opened Threadgill's journal again, searching for something he'd missed. A name. An ally. Anything. On the final page, written small in the corner, "Sarah and Emma, Denver. Tell them I tried." A wife. A daughter. Threadgill hadn't been just a greedy prospector. He'd been a father trying to leave something behind. Silas looked at Delilah, standing sentinel in the darkness. She'd watched her master die protecting a secret. Now she'd chosen Silas to finish what Threadgill started. 4 days until the equinox. 4 days until Cade stopped asking and started taking. Silas made his decision. Tomorrow, they'd ride for the mission. They'd camp there and wait for September 22nd. If Cade wanted what Threadgill hid, he'd have to go through both of them to get it. The mission rose from the desert like a ghost. Adobe walls crumbling, wooden beams exposed to decades of wind and sun. The bell tower stood tallest, empty and hollow, where bronze once hung. Silas tied his gelding in the shade. Delilah walked straight to the courtyard, no hesitation, like she'd been here before. Maybe she had. Maybe Threadgill brought her here dozens of times, training her for this exact moment. The courtyard was a mess, holes everywhere. Cade's men had been digging blind, tearing up ground without understanding what they were looking for. They'd found nothing because they didn't have the complete map. In the center stood San Miguel, 8 feet of weathered stone, sword raised to heaven, wings spread wide. Silas studied the statue's position, the angle of its base, the direction it faced. He pulled out Threadgill's journal and a stub of pencil, started calculating. September 22nd, autumn equinox. Sun sets at 6:43 p.m., but the shadow would be longest and most defined at 4:47 p.m., exactly as he'd figured. At that moment, San Miguel's shadow would stretch across the courtyard, pointing like an arrow. But pointing where? The courtyard was 60 feet across. Even with the shadow's direction, there were hundreds of possible spots. Cade could dig for months and never find the right place, unless you had Delilah. Silas watched her walk the courtyard. She moved to the eastern edge, pawed the ground. 12 times. Then she traced her star pattern, 5 points meeting back at the center. He sketched it all in the journal's margins. The shadow's angle. Delilah's pattern. The geometry was starting to make sense. Threadgill had created a coordinate system using the statue's shadow and the mare's trained movements. Where they intersected, that's where he'd buried his secret. A sound behind him. Silas spun, hand on his pistol. Father Domingo stepped from the shadows of the ruined chapel. "Thought I might find you here." "Just passing through." "With Threadgill's mare, on the eve of the equinox." The priest's eyes were kind but knowing. Amos came here often in his final months, always with the horse. I asked him once what he was doing. He said he was leaving insurance for his family. Silas relaxed slightly. Did you know him well? Well enough to know he wasn't a bad man, just desperate. His wife left him, took their daughter. Said prospecting was more important to him than they were. He spent 2 years trying to prove her wrong, trying to strike it rich so he could bring them home. The priest gestured at the torn-up courtyard. Cade's been here twice a week for months. Whatever Amos hid, it's worth killing for. I know. Then why stay? Why not leave and let Cade have it? Silas looked at Delilah. She stood by San Miguel, patient and loyal, still keeping faith with a dead man's final wishes. Because Threadgill trusted her, and she chose to trust me. Father Domingo nodded slowly. Cade will come on the 22nd. He's not stupid. He knows the date matters. I'm counting on it. The priest blessed them both and left as quietly as he'd arrived. Silas made camp in the chapel ruins. 3 days until the equinox. 3 days to prepare for whatever came. Delilah lay near the fire, but her eyes stayed fixed on the courtyard, watching shadows that hadn't fallen yet. 2 days before the equinox, Silas woke to Delilah's warning sound. Low, urgent. 3 men crept through the courtyard shadows. Not Cade. His crew. They moved toward where Delilah was tied near the chapel. Silas raised his rifle. That's far enough. They froze. The lead man, a scarred brute named Jessup, raised his hands. Easy, Garrick. We're just looking around. At my horse. In the dark. Cade wants to talk. Thought we'd bring the mare as a conversation starter. Jessup grinned. He's offering $200 now. Final offer. Tell him no. You're making a mistake. Whatever Threadgill hid, you think you can keep it? Cade's got 12 men. You got a broken horse and borrowed time. Silas cocked the rifle. Leave. They backed away slow, but Jessup's grin never faded. See you on the 22nd, Garrick. We'll all watch that shadow fall together. After they left, Silas couldn't sleep. He studied Threadgill's journal by firelight, reading passages he'd skipped before, personal things, a father's regrets. March 15th. Emma would be 7 now. Does she remember me? Does Sarah tell her I'm coming back? May 2nd. Found the vein today. It's real. It's big. This is the one that brings them home. May 8th. Filed the claim, but didn't list coordinates. Can't trust anyone. Not until I have enough to prove to Sarah I've changed. The entries grew darker as Cade entered the picture. June 1st. Cade knows I found something. He's watching. Need to protect the claim until I can work it proper. June 14th. Moving everything tomorrow. If something happens to me, Delilah will lead someone worthy to the truth. Not Cade. Never Cade. Someone who sees value in broken things. Silas closed the journal. Someone who sees value in broken things. That's why Threadgill made the mare look worthless. Protected her by making her invisible to greedy men. Dawn came cold. Silas walked the courtyard with fresh eyes, trying to see what Threadgill saw. The statue, the shadows, the geometry of it all. Delilah joined him, and together they traced the pattern. She walked 12 paces along what would be the shadow's line at 4:47 p.m. Then she stopped at a stone tile marked with a faded Spanish cross. That was it. The intersection point, where the shadow met the mare's count. Silas knelt, brushed dirt from the tile. It was loose. Someone could pry it up easily, but only if they knew which tile mattered, only if they had Delilah to show them. He left it undisturbed. Tomorrow was the equinox. Tomorrow, he'd dig. Tomorrow, he'd face Cade. That night, he heard horses. Many horses. They didn't approach, just circled the mission in the darkness. 6, maybe 8. Cade was assembling his forces. Delilah pressed close to him, trembling but not fleeing. She'd chosen her side months ago when Threadgill died. She'd waited through 5 owners until she found one who'd stay, one who'd fight. Silas cleaned his rifle and checked his pistol. 12 rounds total, against 8 men or more. The odds were bad, but Threadgill had faced worse and almost succeeded, almost got his family back. Silas touched the journal in his coat pocket. Sarah and Emma. Denver. Tell them I tried. Maybe tomorrow he'd do more than try. Maybe tomorrow he'd finish what a desperate father started. 1 day left. September 22nd. The air felt different. Charged, like the world was holding its breath. Silas positioned himself in the courtyard at 4:30 p.m. Delilah stood beside him, calm now. She knew this moment. She'd been trained for it. Cade and 7 men sat their horses along the mission wall, watching, waiting. Guns visible, but not drawn. Not yet. "Smart man, Garrick," Cade called out. "Figured it out. Stay where you are." "Oh, I will. For now. Let's see what happens when that shadow falls." The sun crawled across the sky. Minutes felt like hours. Silas watched San Miguel's shadow stretch longer, darker, more defined across the courtyard stones. 4:45 p.m. Almost time. Delilah shifted, her muscles tensed. She felt it too, the moment approaching. 4:47 p.m. The shadow reached its longest point, a perfect line cutting across the courtyard toward the eastern edge. Delilah moved without command, walking along the shadow's path. Her hooves clicked on, stone. 1, 2, 3. Silas counted with her. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. She stopped at the tile marked with the Spanish cross. Pawed it once. This was the spot. Cade spurred his horse forward. "That's far enough, Garrick. You found it. Now step aside." Silas knelt and pried up the tile. The stone came free easier than expected. Beneath it, wrapped in oilskin, was a metal box. Not large, maybe a foot square. He pulled it out as Cade dismounted, his men following. "I'll take that," Cade said, hand on his pistol. Silas opened the box. Inside, folded papers, a map, legal documents with official seals, and a letter. No gold, no cash, just paper. "What is it?" Cade demanded. Silas unfolded the map, a detailed survey showing a location 40 miles north. Coordinates, geological markers. At the top, stamped in official ink, registered gold claim, Amos Threadgill, transferable to bearer. Cade's eyes went wide. The claim papers. He hid the claim papers, along with survey maps showing the vein location. Silas looked at the documents. Worth thousands, according to the assay report. "Hand them over." "These papers are legal. Whoever holds them owns the claim." Silas's voice stayed steady. "Right now, that's me." Cade drew his pistol. His men followed. 7 guns pointed at Silas. Then, horses thundered through the mission gates. 3 riders. Old men, weathered and hard. They positioned themselves between Silas and Cade's crew, rifles ready. "Amos Threadgill was our partner," the lead rider said. His name was Dutch Keller, and he'd been prospecting these territories for 30 years. Father Domingo sent word you might need help, Garrick. This isn't your fight, Cade snarled. Amos was family. That makes it our fight. Dutch's rifle didn't waver. The boy found the claim legal. Papers are transferable. Seems to me he's got the right to decide what happens next. The math had changed. 7 against 4 was still bad odds, but not impossible. Cade knew it. His men knew it. Blood would be spilled. Maybe all of theirs. Cade lowered his weapon slowly. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Silas said. He held up the letter from the box. There's more than just a claim here. There's instructions from a dead man, and I intend to honor them. The words hung in the desert air like a promise. Silas unfolded the letter. His hands shook slightly. Everyone in that courtyard went silent. Read it, Dutch said. Let's hear what Amos wanted. Silas's voice carried across the ruins. To whoever she trusts. If you're reading this, Delilah led you here. That means you're decent. That means you saw worth in something the world called worthless. I need you to understand what this claim represents. Cade shifted in his saddle but said nothing. Silas continued. I found the vein 2 years ago. Richest strike I ever saw. Could have filed and worked it immediately, but I had a choice to make. Work the claim and die alone, or get enough to bring my family home. I chose family. I registered the claim legal, but hid these papers until I could accumulate working capital. Then Virgil Cade started watching, started threatening. I knew he'd kill me for the location. Damn right, Cade muttered. So I trained Delilah, made her look broken so no one would want her, taught her the pattern that would lead someone worthy to this spot, on this day, at this time. If you're holding these papers, you earned them. The claim is yours legally. But I ask one thing. Silas paused. The weight of a dead man's final request hung heavy. Sell the claim. Take half for yourself. You've earned it. But send the other half to Sarah Threadgill in Denver, along with this letter. Tell her I never stopped trying. Tell Emma her father loved her enough to die protecting her future. The claim is registered and transferable. Whoever holds these papers owns it. Please honor this request. Please give my family what I couldn't. Silas folded the letter. Nobody spoke. Dutch cleared his throat. What's the claim worth? Silas checked the assay report. According to this, the vein could produce $8,000 in high-grade ore. Maybe more. Cade leaned forward. That's $4,000 for you, Garrick. $4,000 for a $20 horse. Take it and walk away. Forget about the wife and kid. Threadgill's dead. His debts died with him. Silas looked at Delilah. She stood perfectly still, that one good eye watching him, trusting him, just like Threadgill had trusted her. These papers are legal, Dutch said. Signed and sealed by the territorial office. You own this claim, Silas. What you do with it is your choice. $4,000. Enough to save his ranch, pay his debts, start over proper. All he had to do was ignore a dead man's last wish, or he could honor it, send half to a woman and child he'd never met. Trust that doing right by a stranger's family mattered more than his own survival. Silas looked at Cade, at Dutch and his partners, at Delilah, still waiting for him to prove Threadgill's faith wasn't misplaced. I'm going to Denver, Silas said. I'm going to find Sarah Threadgill, and I'm going to give her what her husband died protecting. Cade spat in the dirt. You're a fool. Maybe, but I'm an honest one. Dutch smiled. We'll ride with you to the territorial office. Make sure the transfer is legal and proper. Cade and his men left without another word. There was nothing left to take, nothing left to threaten. The claim belonged to Silas now, and he'd made his choice clear. The shadow of San Miguel grew longer as the sun set, covering the ground where secrets had been buried and finally unearthed. Denver smelled like coal smoke and progress. Silas had never seen so many people in one place. He found the address from Threadgill's journal on a narrow street, where laundry hung between buildings and children played in the dirt. The woman who answered his knock looked tired, worn down by years of waiting and disappointment, but her eyes were kind. "Sarah Threadgill?" She tensed. "I haven't used that name in 2 years. What do you want?" "My name is Silas Garrick. I have something from your husband." Her face went pale. "Amos is dead." "I know, but he left instructions. May I come in?" Inside the small room, a girl sat at a table doing arithmetic, 7 years old, dark hair like her mother. Emma. Silas laid the papers on the table, the claim documents, the letter, and a bank draft for $4,000. Sarah's hands shook as she read Amos's final words. Tears fell on the paper, smudging the ink. When she finished, she looked up at Silas with devastation and gratitude mixed together. He really did it. He really found something. He found something worth dying for, worth protecting for you and Emma. But this says you own the claim. You could have kept everything. Your husband asked me not to, and I met the Mare he trusted with his secret. If she could stay loyal, so could I. Sarah wept. Emma moved to her mother's side, confused, but understanding something important had happened. $4,000, Sarah whispered. We can start over. I can open the bakery I always wanted. Emma can go to proper school. She looked at Silas. What about you? $4,000 isn't enough for what you've done. It's enough to save my ranch. That's all I need. 3 weeks later, Silas stood in his repaired barn. New fence posts lined the property. His debts were paid. The remaining money was already working, already building something that would last. Delilah stood in the pasture, her coat growing back thick and healthy. She'd gained weight. The limp was barely noticeable now. She'd never be beautiful by anyone's standards, but she was whole. She walked over when Silas called, pressed her nose against his hand. That clouded eye looked at him with something that might have been contentment. You did good, girl. Threadgill would be proud. The town of Copper Ridge looked at Silas differently now. Not as the desperate son of a drunk, but as a man who'd honored a stranger's dying wish when he could have taken everything for himself. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can find isn't gold, or land, or money. Sometimes it's knowing you're the kind of person who does right when no one's watching, who sees worth in broken things, who understands that mercy has its own rewards. Silas learned that from a Mare everyone called Cursed, a Mare who knew loyalty was worth more than all the gold in Montana territory. As the sun set over his land, Delilah grazed peacefully. No more patterns to walk, no more secrets to guard. Just a horse who'd finished her mission and found a home where broken things could heal. Sometimes pity leads to fortune, not the kind you bury in the ground, but the kind you carry in your chest. The kind that reminds you that choosing kindness over greed makes you richer than any strike ever could. If this story touched your heart, click the like button and subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories of courage and redemption. Share this with someone who needs to remember that doing the right thing always pays off, even when it costs everything. See you in the next story.